Last week we started taking a look at the life of Joseph, and we looked at Joseph's trip from being thrown into a pit by his brothers to be appointed the prime minister of Egypt. And we noticed that Joseph kept his faith in God throughout his journey. No matter what happened to him, he just kept his faith in God. When his brothers, Joseph was 17 years old when he came to his brothers, and he told them about the dream that he had, that he was, and he was probably being a little bit of a punk, let's be honest about it, right? He was telling them that, hey, y'all are going to bow down to me. I had this dream, and this is what's going to happen. And so they didn't take to that too well, and they dug a hole, basically dug a bear trap for him, and threw him in it and left him for dead. And there were some merchants come by, some traders came by, and they said, hey, we may as well make some money off of him if we're going to, no sense in us killing him if we can sell him. And so they sold him for $20. Said they sold him for 20 pieces of silver. I know some of you would take less than that for your brother. But they sold him for 20 pieces of silver. And so here Joseph goes. He's got this dream of being a ruler, of being the head of something. And he doesn't exactly know what that is. He doesn't know what it all means. He doesn't know where God's going to take him. Doesn't have any idea about any of that really. But he's got this dream of being a head of something. And now he's a slave in Egypt. He's a slave in Egypt. And so he does pretty well. And he gets up to being the head servant in Potiphar's house. Potiphar was he was the head of Secret Service in Egypt. He said he was the chief of the bodyguards. He was like the head of Secret Service. And so he was the head servant in Potiphar's house. Pretty good job, right? And he worked his way up. And then Potiphar's wife, she had the hots for Joseph. And so she framed him because Joseph kept following God everywhere he was. He refused to give in to temptation. And so she framed him, had him thrown in prison. It says when he went to prison, Joseph worked his way up in prison. He ran the place. He gets to prison. The Bible says that the prison guard didn't even supervise the things that Joseph was over. He just kind of said, yeah, you do your thing, and takes that off of my back, and I'll do the rest of this stuff. And so Joseph, he was able to work his way up into management positions, so to speak, everywhere he was. But now he was in prison. And so we see this constant up and down in Joseph's life. And then finally, while he's in prison, he interpreted a couple of dreams by the power of God. He stayed faithful to God. And so, as it turned out, Joseph, because he interpreted the dream for Pharaoh, Joseph goes from the pit to the palace. He's prime minister at that point. And the Bible says that Pharaoh looked at him and said, only in regard to the throne am I more powerful than you. You run the place. You run the place. And so here he is, prime minister of Egypt. And so we see this, Joseph had this dream about his brothers bowing down to him. And it was 23 years later, around about 22 or 23 years later, when this happened. And this is Genesis 42:6. And it says, now Joseph was the ruler over the land. He was the one who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. This is a long wait. And it was a long ride. And it was a long journey that Joseph went on to get to this point. This was the literal fulfillment of Joseph's dream. He dreamed that his brothers would bow down to him one day. And that day had come. This is that day. His brothers had no idea who they were bowing down to, but Joseph, it says that Joseph recognized them. And just to kind of catch you up in the story, Joseph's brothers, they came down to Egypt from what we now know as Israel. And we know that there was a really bad famine at the time. It had been going on for 2 years. by this time. Food was really hard to find. And Jacob sent Joseph's brothers. Jacob sent his brothers down and said, hey, there's food down in Egypt. Y'all get yourself down there, buy some food in Egypt, because we're going to starve if you don't. Right? And so they go down to Egypt. And there they are. They're face to face with Joseph. And his dream was fulfilled at that moment in time. It says they bowed their face to the ground to Joseph. That was a literal fulfillment of the dream. But the purpose of this is the most important part of the story. The purpose of this is the most important part of the story. I want you to get this. See, Joseph held one of his brothers ransom, so they would bring his youngest brother, Benjamin. And all through this, Joseph, he kept his identity hidden from his brothers. He didn't tell them who he was. And so through a couple of tricks, Joseph, he tricked them a couple of times. But through that, all of his brothers, he had them all in his dining room. He had them all in his dining room at that point in time. All right? So he's got them all there. And so here's what it says in chapter 45, verse 4 and 5. It says, then Joseph said to his brothers, please come closer to me. And they came closer. And he said, I am your brother, Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. Now do not be grieved or angry with yourself because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. This is really important for us to understand. Joseph was in some really bad predicaments. His brothers dug a hole, threw him in it. They left him for dead. And when some merchants came by, they sold him as a slave. He ended up going down there, did pretty well for a minute, but then all of a sudden he gets thrown into prison for something he didn't do. That was Joseph's path. That was his pathway to the palace. And I want to tell you today that no matter where you find yourself, God can take you from there into His plan for your life. I don't care where you are now. It doesn't matter whether you put yourself there or somebody else put you there. God can still work in your life and bring His purposes into your life. So here we have Joseph's words. I really hope we understand this morning. We have Joseph's words. God sent me before you to preserve life. God used Joseph to provide food for a whole region, the whole Middle East. They were all starving. There was a famine going on. The thing lasted 7 years. Joseph said, God sent me before you to preserve life. Joseph, he was able to see God's bigger purpose for his life instead of only looking at himself. Say that one more time. I don't want it to be until Tuesday before you get that. Joseph was able to see God's bigger picture and bigger purpose instead of only looking at his own life. He saw that God took him to the palace in order to be used to preserve other people's lives. Can I tell you that God has a great purpose for your life? I really believe that. I believe that about everybody in this building. That God has a great purpose for your life. However, it's not just about you. Some of y'all got disappointed just then. Anybody ever watched the TV show Reba? Like, not very good acting, but it's kind of entertaining, right? Stacy watches it, every now and then. And I watch it with her. And I remember it was Barbara Jean's her name. She says she looked at Reba once and she said, there's this one point in the universe that everything circles around. And that point is not you. God has a purpose for our life, but it's not just about us. God's purpose for your life is never going to stop with you. It's never going to stop with just you. God's purpose for your life is to bless someone else. Is to be a help to someone else. Can I tell you this morning that sometimes we get too self-focused. We get so self-centered. And we, when we think about what God has for our lives. Yes, it's true. Joseph was promoted. God promoted him to a high position. Yes, it's true that Joseph ended up being a wealthy and very powerful man. But unfortunately in our time, this is what we look for. I mean, this is what people seek after, right? Is to be successful, to be our own thing, and to have this and to have that, and to be comfortable and all of that, right? And what we seek after. Here, the problem with that is that God's purpose for us it never stops with us. It never stops with us. If it did, here's the thing. If God's purpose for your life, if it stopped with you, He'd just go ahead and take you out and be done with it. Right? I mean, just take me on to glory, Jesus. I got nothing else to do. If it's just all about me, just lift me up, beat me up, Jesus. But it's not just about me. And so here's what we see, is that Joseph stayed faithful to God. He understood that God's work in his life wasn't just about him. In fact, Joseph understood that the Lord's work in his life, it was primarily for other people. Let me ask you this one. What is it that you want the Lord to do in your life? Really think about that question. What is it that you want the Lord to do in your life? Have you asked Him what His plan is for your life? I want to encourage you to do that. I want to encourage you to ask God that specific question, but add one more thing to it. Ask God to show you what He wants to do in your life so that others can be blessed by your life. See, Jesus taught His disciples that very thing. He taught them that very thing. If you look in Mark chapter 10, verse 45, here's what Jesus said about Himself. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give His life a ransom for many. Get this full picture. This is the Son of God. This is God in the flesh. This is the one, that center point in the universe that everything does all. He is it. And He says, I didn't come to be served, but to serve and to give my life as a ransom for many. This is the one. This is the one. And we look for things to benefit us all the time. And Jesus looked at His own life, but He looked through this lens. He said, Jesus said of Himself, He said, I'm a servant to other people because I know that that's my purpose of being here in the first place. You might look at your life and wonder how you got to the position you're in right now. Maybe it's a good one, maybe it's a bad one. You might look at your life and wonder what's next and how did I get here, and maybe it even feels like it's kind of over for you. Maybe you feel like it's too late for you. Maybe you feel like you walked down the wrong path too far. You might even look at your life and say, people, you know what? People have done too many things to me. Throw me in a pit when I didn't deserve it. Throw me in prison when I didn't deserve it. People have done too many things. Or maybe you're the one you jumped in the pit and jumped into prison on your own. I want want to encourage you to look around your life and see how you can serve others. If Jesus came for the purpose of serving others, He's given you and I that same purpose. See, Joseph never looked at his life and said, God, you gave me a raw deal. God. No, we don't know everything Joseph said. We don't know everything Joseph prayed. I imagine there's some days. Now, the Bible doesn't tell us this, it kind of skips through a couple years at a time with Joseph's life. But I imagine there were some times, and I'm preaching this morning. You can preach next week. But I'm just imagining Joseph's life, right? I imagine there were some times when he said, God, I don't get this. Here you gave me this dream, and now I'm a felon in prison, all right? I'm not just in prison, I'm in Pharaoh's prison, which means I'm a state prisoner at this point. They're going to execute me. And you gave me this dream. I bet, you know what? I bet Joseph had some times. I bet Joseph had some times when he wondered if God lied to him. I bet Joseph had some times where he wondered if God was even real. But Joseph had some times when he said, God, I don't know why you don't answer my prayers. I wonder, it says, we talked about last week, after the butler, he got his job back. And it says that he forgot about Joseph. I wonder if Joseph looked at God and said, that guy didn't even believe in you. Look what you did to him. Anybody ever felt any of those things? No matter where you are in your life, look around your life. Look around your life and see what God has given you and see where He can use you to serve other people. See, if we focus on ourselves too much, then it becomes we get a little nauseous after a while. You have gifts, you have abilities, you have talents that nobody else has. What are you doing with those? What are you doing with those? See, here's some things about Joseph. Here's some things we know about Joseph. He was a really, really good administrator. Joseph was an administrator. He's an administrator everywhere he goes. You know what? He was such a good administrator, he couldn't help but be an administrator. He was a servant in Potiphar's house immediately. He was an administrator. Right? They saw that in him, and he used that, and he ran the whole place. Ran it better than anybody else had. He got to jail. The chief jailer said, he's an administrator. I'm going to put him in charge of this joint. Right? He got to Pharaoh. Pharaoh saw, man, this guy's an administrator. I'm going to put him in charge of some stuff. This guy can get stuff done. Like, he can motivate people, and he seems to be able to just organize it all. He's just good at it. He had this gift of administration and leadership. But it was also compassionate. God put in Joseph a heart of compassion. He had compassion on people, even with his brothers, the ones who left him for dead. He had compassion. He had compassion on this whole region. He developed a plan to preserve, he said to preserve life, right? He didn't just say, you know what? Food about to get scarce around here. I'm going to hoard some up for me. Don't know what y'all going to do. He didn't do that. He said there's a whole region here. So depend on me. And he had compassion. And he focused on the needs of other people. He focused on the needs of other people. This is who Joseph is. Can I tell you that you are who you are? God's given you certain abilities. God's given you certain gifts. Are you using those things to serve others? Are you using those things to serve others? See, Joseph was good at some things that were needed at the time. He used his administrative gifts. He used his compassion, his natural compassion. And this caused him to really focus on others. Are you using the things that God has given you? Are you using the gifts that God's placed in your life? The gifts, the abilities, the talents, whatever it is. Are you using those things to serve others? I'll just say, some of you aren't. Is that all right? Preacher, tell the truth this morning. Some of you aren't. We've been looking for people to do all kinds of stuff for a long time. We've never had enough children's workers. We still don't have enough children's workers. We still need a handful of children's workers. Nobody wants to do it. You want the truth? Some people say they will do it, and then they don't. You don't commit. Just how it is. We need people to do this. We need people to do that. So, as pastor, so y'all know, like, I spend a lot of time in jail. Right? So, I spend a lot of time in jail, and I go, talk to people about, what they've done, and I'm going to send a report to the judge. And of course, they want to be best, I'm a really good guy, just, this little thing. And so they try to snowball me, right? I'm a pretty good lie detector. And,
the best.
I know that when I go there, I'm going to get lied to. So I just know that, right? I get lied to as much when I'm Dr. Newsom in the jail. I get lied to as much as being Pastor Jason as I do Dr. Newsom. Ooh, it's going to be quiet. This can be fun. This can be fun. Just go with me, man, okay? But I do, because people say, well, yeah, I'm going to do this, and I'm like, well, yeah. And that happens because we're too self-focused. We're too self-focused. We even look at church as, like going to the ice cream stand. That's how we see it. It's going to the ice cream stand. I'm going to go get this something I like, right? And then, whatever after that. Instead of walking in and saying, how can I serve other people? Jesus told a story about this. I'm not going to go through the whole thing because I know about 15 minutes you're going to get nervous. But Matthew chapter 25, Jesus told this story. Y'all probably know this story. But in verse 14 through 16, he says, he's talking about heaven, the kingdom of heaven, and being part of the kingdom of God. And he said, it's like a man about to go on a journey who called his own slaves and entrusted his possessions to them. To one, he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, each according to his own ability. And he went on his journey, and immediately the one who had received the 5 talents went and traded with them and gained 5 more. So a talent is a certain amount of money, okay? So it's just it was a measure of money at the time. And so we'll skip down to verse 19. It says, now after a long time, the master of those slaves, he came and settled accounts with them. And the one who received the 5 talents came up and brought 5 more. Say, master, you entrusted 5 talents to me, and see, I've gained 5 more talents. And his master said, well done, good and faithful slave. You were faithful in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. Now, I don't want to get through this whole parable this morning, but I do want to talk about what it means when the Lord gives us something. So here we have the master who gives a certain amount of money. Again, that's what a talent was. And he gave 3 different people different amounts. Then he returns and he asks the 3 what they've done with what they gave to him. The one that he gave 5 talents, let's just say $500. All right. So he gives him $500, and he comes and he says, "See, I've taken what you gave me and used it." Get this. I've taken what you gave me and used it in a way that's consistent with what you told me to. I used what you gave me in the way that you told me to. And I doubled it. And I actually have more to give you. And the master was pleased with this man. And he told him to, enter into the joy of the Lord. And let me ask you something. What are you doing with what you've been given? What are you doing with what you've been given? Are you using the things that God has given you to fulfill His purpose? Or are you just holding on to them? Are you allowing God to use you to bless other people? See, one of these 3, he didn't do anything with what the master gave him. Did nothing with it. It says that he went and buried it. Score 1 for the hoarders, right? He went and buried it. Here's what the master had to say about him. Verse 30 of Matthew chapter 25. "Throw out the worthless Satan to outer darkness, in that place where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." We'd like to skip over this verse, right? We can get into all kinds of reasons that this servant didn't do what the master wanted. He said that he was afraid. Jesus said that he was lazy. No matter the reason, the servant was disobedient. And I have to ask you this morning, are you doing the Lord's will with the things that He's given you? Have you submitted yourself to God and allowed Him to use you for His purposes in your life? Or are you still focused on yourself only? See, if we don't know anything else about Joseph, we know that he submitted himself to God. And he used the gift that God gave him every step of the way. When he got down to Egypt as a slave, he served with everything he had. When he was thrown into prison, the Lord gave him the ability to interpret dreams, and he used that gift every opportunity he was given. When he got to the palace, Joseph used his gift of administration and leadership to serve a whole nation, in fact, a whole region of people. If I can fast forward this morning, Joseph ends up with all of his brothers in the dining room, and he has them to go get his father and everything they have and bring it all to Egypt. And so the whole family came to Egypt, and they were given a piece of land called Goshen, and it says it was the best of the land. And after a while, Jacob, their father, died. And it was this point, Joseph's brothers, they started to get afraid again. They thought, hey, he probably wasn't going to do anything to us while Dad's alive, but now that Dad's gone, I bet he's going to get his revenge now. Here's what Joseph had to say about that. Genesis chapter 50, verse 20 and 21. It says, "As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring about this present result, to preserve many people alive. So therefore, do not be afraid. I will provide for you and your little ones." So he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. Joseph shows remarkable forgiveness and compassion.
Yes.
And the reason is because he understood God's plan. He understood that God had used circumstances and Joseph's abilities to preserve a nation. Joseph or Jacob rather, and his family, the whole family comes to Egypt. They got bigger and bigger. Over a period of 400 years, they grew into a whole nation inside of Egypt. That nation gave birth to a king named David. That lineage gave birth to a Savior named Jesus. God used Joseph to preserve the line from Abraham to Jesus. Thousands of years down the road, Joseph had an impact. You and I are offered salvation through the plan of God. It was going on all the way back then. Joseph committed his life to God. He didn't know anything about that. Joseph didn't know anything about King David, the throne of David. He didn't know anything about the tribe of Judah, going to bring forth a lion. He didn't know any of that stuff. Didn't know anything about Jesus. Didn't know anything about Messiah. But that's what God used him to do. To bless other people long after he was gone. I want us to understand this morning that no matter where we find ourselves, God can use it for our good as well as the good of other people. Have you committed your life to following after God? Have you truly submitted yourself to him and said, God, I don't know what you know. I don't know all the details of the future. I don't know what's taking place tomorrow or next week or next year. But I'm just going to trust your plans. I'm going to commit myself to you. And I'm going to commit myself to using what you've given me for your purposes. So you might feel like you're in a pit sometimes. You might feel like everyone close to you has abandoned you. You might feel like you've been betrayed. I want you to know this morning that God can take your life and use it to bless others. Do you trust God with your life this morning?